Hello and welcome to Soul's Compass Healing. My name is Brianne Lazinski. I sincerely welcome you to this space. I'm an evolutionary astrologer of the Jeffrey Wolf Green lineage. My teacher is Timothy Halloran, and he is giving a talk about Pluto, the high octave of Pluto, on October 26th. And this is happening as a part of the annual online Evolutionary Astrologers Conference. I will put a link in the description of this video. I highly recommend that you attend. Today I'm going to be kicking off this talk talking about Pluto, because Pluto just stationed direct in the sign of Aquarius for the first time. Pluto is also forming a disseminating square to this new moon in Libra happening on October 21st. And Jeffrey Wolf Green, when he talked about a planet stationing direct, this time that we had of Pluto retrograde brought up what? The relive situation of humanity's history. And is this not what we are seeing reflected in many aspects of the astrology right now? Neptune on the Aries point, Saturn on the Aries point. We have just had a South Nodal Virgo solar eclipse, which is that whole energy that we've been cycling through in this last month is the imprint, overarching imprint for the next 6 months. And so this brings up humanity's history, humanity's shadow, in order to what? In order to be revolutionized into something new. That's what Uranus wants to do. Uranus wants to transform. Uranus wants to take us out of what we know. Do we even know our history? We have to know our history in order to become free from it. That's the thing. So that's why it's so important that we remain educated, that we hold up the institutions of intellectual wisdom and knowledge. In order that we remember humanity's history, because humanity's history obviously repeats, because it's seeking resolution. Neptune is going to be heading back into Pisces the day after this Libra new moon. And so, again, this brings up this, reliving of the past in order to be resolved. And the resolution process is very messy, right? Because of the context in which we are living in. So Jeffrey Wolf Green taught that there are evolutionary stages, and 75% of the population actually does not have the capacity to put themselves in another person's shoes. Another way of saying that is that the archetype of Libra, which brings up the other, is severely compromised, because it's obvious that we know, like, I'm Tom from Jerry or whatever, but when we hear comments such as, well, why are they sitting on social welfare when I went out and got a job, why can't they? These sorts of comments is where we really feel the insidiousness, how hidden, Libra, hidden, masked, denial, superficial judgments, all of the oppressions are. White supremacy, gender oppression, even genocide. It's amazing how hidden it is. And when this is revealed, it's shocking to most people because of this hive mind mentality of that 75% who still need to go through the process of developing their own opinions, their own mind on things. And so in a certain, we can certainly say there is a large part of what is, happening out there in the grand scheme of things that is far beyond any one of our control. The layers of violence and oppression that shape our cultural standards of how we relate to one another certainly makes me sick. And if you're watching this video, it likely makes you sick too. And so I'm thankful that we can gather together and we can talk about things like how politeness is a tool of the oppressor, right? If somebody is oppressed and they get angry, what do they get? They get a finger pointed at them. That they're being violent. They're the problem. They're being scapegoated, gaslit, shadow projected upon, right? I use the word violence a lot, and it sometimes may seem like it's unwarranted, but it happens in a very insidious and hidden nature that we all need to begin waking up to. Because if we don't, we will not see the layers of how this cultural conditioning of how we must show up in relationship to ourselves and to others might actually be carrying a harm, or it might be harming certain people, right? And the funny thing about, I shouldn't say the funny thing, the interesting thing about humanity and where we are sitting at right now, and we can see this in this new moon in Libra because it's forming a yod to Uranus and Neptune. And this is really about a choice point for humanity. We are at this time where we have so many tech advances. There's so much wealth on this planet. And we are really sitting at an unprecedented time in humanity's story. We've never been here before experiencing this level of bursting forth, especially in the realm of tech. And in that moment, in this moment that we are in, there is so much potential. There is potential for that to be used for good, and there is potential for that to be used for evil. And what we are seeing is that this also represents Libra. Libra is going to extremes, right, in order to find that balance. And with Uranus retrograde at 0 Gemini, as Pluto makes his first station, and they're trining each other, there is this inversion, I guess I will call it, an inversion of good and evil that we can observe happening. And this is the very fact that those who profess that they are the good doers, those who believe inherently in their internal reality that they are the good doers, that they could never do any evil, are the most likely to do evil and to harm others. And those who look at themselves in their internal reality and are facing the fear of looking at one's own shadows to see, where does the potential for evil reside in me? Where does the potential for harming others reside in me? How does that play out? Those are the people who are most likely to do good. You know? I've seen this time and time again in the case study of my life, that those who are the walking contradictions are the people to stay far, far away from, if possible. So we're faced with seeing this extremism playing out on the grand stage, and we are in a time where there is cover-ups or justice, and I suppose it's, with that South Nodal Virgo eclipse that we just had, this is an exercise in humanity. Okay, how far have we come in our discernment, right? If we idealize ourselves or another as being 100% good, or project that that they are 100% evil, and therefore that makes us 100% good, then, well, that's just not justice doing, because it starts inside. It starts when we can face our own potential and capacity for good and evil, that then we are more clearly able to see how we can make our contribution to humanity. And this is about, pleading, no more blind leading the blind, please. This is about Pluto stationing direct in Aquarius, being a symbol of, okay, humanity, do you want to revolutionize from the past? Do you want things to be different from how they have been? And we may have to go through a series of mass traumas in order to be woken up in the grand scheme of things. But what I'm speaking to on the micro lens, on what we can each individually be doing, is our own shadow work, looking at our own individuation process, looking at our own triggers. And I did say why, and that's so that we can realize and embody and do justice by fulfilling our unique and sacred contribution to humanity. And what I want to say about Chiron opposing this new moon in Libra, being T-squared by Jupiter in Cancer, Chiron's also ruled by Mars in Scorpio, exactly conjunct Mercury, our south nodal ruler. So as we are entering a month which is going to be even more highlighted as trigger central, people are going to be very sensitive to the wounds that are often running unconsciously, that's sort of hidden beneath the surface as our society prioritizes superficiality and, making everything look nice and seem nice, right? So there can be a lot of like fumes burning with the doors closed type of energy where it's the Chiron in Aries that we've been processing for the last long while now. One thing that I do want to say about that, obviously, I talked about how 75% of the population has not gone through this process of individuation. And yet, there still is this reflection on the grand scheme of things of the wounded individual. And this creates what we are seeing as the most prominent relationship pattern right now, codependency and narcissism. So codependency is that over-identification with the other, right? So that loss of individuality. And narcissism is also a loss of individuality, actually, right? It's when that sense of self is totally and completely merged with the false sense of reality in order to provide security. And why I'm bringing this up is because, this T-square to Jupiter in Cancer, let's talk about the shadow of what that might be. Well, when a person has underdeveloped ego, right, where their safety and security is not developed to the point where they can stand on their own 2 feet, know who they are, know their capacity for good and harming others, have the ability to take accountability for their actions. If a person does not have that, then they will have this need, this sort of pit of need, that they will always need to be told that they're right, and that they're, this really does form a complex in their relationships, right? Where they're orientated to doing anything in order to be told that what they're doing is right, what they're doing is good, moral, in order to get that security fix, right? And so essentially what I'm trying to say is that if we learn how to self-source our security and our safety through this inner reparenting process, that is really where we can integrate change in this dynamic of relationships of the codependent and the narcissist, because there is a integrating happening of that inner security where the sense of individuality is self-sourced from within, as opposed to needing that external fix. And this is really just getting to the bottom line of core Libra Aries wounding. And so, yeah, I could go more into that, but I'm not going to right now. And yeah, with Mars and Mercury there in the sign of Scorpio, the liberation of that wounded individuality occurs, through this evolutionary necessity, right? It's likely going to be that we experience this knocking on the door of, expanding this sore spot for us, this trigger point for us that is really awakening this primal or unconscious part of us that is like kind of needing that nudge in order to look at the underbelly of what's going on, right? Like what has been brushed under the rug. And it is a painful process gathering that psychological evidence from what has formed our sense of self, what has formed our sense of relating, looking to how we have been conditioned to relate to ourselves and others. What is going on deep inside of us on that psychological level. There's so much, and it can be a massive, massive learning curve if we are willing to open up to that level of depth in order to, really heal those wounds, so that the next time that event happens, it doesn't trigger us so deeply and so badly that it sends us, right down into this hugely traumatic event. And that's not to say that that can be warded off, right? That we can have a life that, doesn't hurt. But that is to say that we can use that creative friction of seeing the past and how it has formed the present. And we can, use that information that we get from our emotional body to actually catalyze us towards waking up and making the desired changes that we want to make in our life, which can be really hard when it all feels too much, when it all feels overwhelming. So this is a time when I do recommend that you have, a therapist who's doing this deep diving with you. It's really important that we have a witness, a objective observer, to help us identify what is going on, because when we're in this sort of stretching out phase where we are wanting to open up to our shadow and allow it to stretch out enough so that we can see it and that we can learn from it, because hot tip, it actually is a very, like under all of this scary, messy, sort of like mask of what the shadow is and how it behaves, underneath all of that, it's actually a very tender part that needs a lot of love. And so there is a there is a necessity for us to what was I gonna say? I don't know. Yeah, to have a witness around that so that we can right, that's what I was gonna say. To hold the complexity. To hold the complexity of that. Because that's complex. Right? Oh, shadow is just a part of us that really, really, really needs to be acknowledged and self-realized. It takes us away from this mainstream way of thinking that is very black and white. And we can use the law of polarity in evolutionary astrology to help us understand how these psychodynamics work. And the deeper and deeper that we get into it, the more we understand how to use them in a way that is holding more and more and more and more complexity, rather than it just being a black and white thing. And so I am available. Evolutionary Astrology Counseling from me is available at soulscompasshealing.com. And there's plenty of others out there too who know what they're doing. And I'm going to leave this video at that. I sincerely hope that this next lunation, when those triggers come up, if they do, that you are able to see beyond the superficiality, see beyond the black and white, and grow more into holding space for the complexity of life. And on the grand scheme of things, well, we'll see how everything plays out. Thanks for listening.